ladies and gentlemen, UFC 318, Dustin Poirier versus Max Holloway 3 is set for this weekend in New Orleans. Of course, the Diamond Dustin Poirier, absolute legend, is set to make his final walk to the octagon to face a familiar foe in a trilogy bout against Max Blessed Holloway. We're going to be breaking down this entire fight card from the bottom to the top, giving our predictions on how we think these fights are going to shake out. Alright, let's break this card down. I will preface this by saying that for a UFC pay-per-view numbered card, these prelims leave a lot to be desired when it comes to the names and notoriety, if you will. We just saw a much more stacked prelims, much more stacked, at the UFC Nashville event last weekend, headlined by Derek Lewis. So I'm going to say that. I think the last two prelims, Kyler Phillips and Martin Vettori, those two matchups against Brendan Allen and Vinicius Oliveira, those are really good matchups. And I'm not saying that these aren't going to be good fights, but when we see pay-per-views, especially something as special as an absolute legend like Dustin Poirier retiring, you would expect them to throw together a card that is a little bit better than this. That's all I'm saying. I mean, for fuck's sake, we've got a UFC fight night in the Middle East that is absolutely stacked top to bottom. And that's a fight night. Again, we had UFC Nashville very, very recently that was top to bottom. You pretty much knew a fighter in every match. These prelims, like, again, I watch this sport every weekend, and some of these people, it's like I don't know who these folks are. Like, you think I remember a very mediocre, brand new women's MMA flyweight? I'm not. We're not getting to know women's MMA flyweights until they're on a 2-3 fight win streak, folks. You know what I'm saying? But we're starting the card off hot with brand new. We got an 0-1 versus a 1-1, and she's got 6 fights in her pro career. Come on. Brutal. But I am going to go with Carly Crispy Judice. She's a little bit more athletic. I like, typically when there's a southpaw orthodox matchup, I tend to lean a little bit towards the southpaw. But Carly typically has very good volume. We're probably going to see a decent bit of rear leg body kicks from Carly. You could see them from Nicole as well. They're going to be there for each person, but Carly's probably going to take this one home. Moving on, Bruno Ferreira and Jackson McVeigh. Bruno Ferreira, I think it's being a little disrespectful that he's this far down in the prelims. Nonetheless, this is going to be a pretty, I think stylistically, it's one of the more fun matchups of the entire card. You've got a really lanky for the division, the middleweight division, Jackson McVeigh, making his UFC debut. Again, why are we having people make their UFC debuts on the prelims of a pay-per-view card? It makes absolutely no sense. Against Bruno Hulk Ferreira. Bruno is a 7-fight vet in the UFC. He's been up against some pretty stout opponents in the middleweight division. Experience-wise, Bruno's got a ton. He's very difficult to get out of there. He hits like a fucking train. And he's a good grappler. Jackson McVeigh, I know I just said I like southpaw versus orthodox, and I do like him on the feet here, but Bruno is going to take his ass to the ground, 1,000%. Bruno's operating with a 5-inch reach disadvantage. He's also 5 inches shorter than Jackson McVeigh. Not saying he can't stand and bang a little bit, but I think if Bruno is smart here, he's going to implement his wrestling and his grappling. I think that's the way to get to the victory here. I'm not saying that he's not going to take any damage. When you're operating at that big of a reach disadvantage and height disadvantage, you have to work your way in somehow, right? So hopefully he doesn't rush things. He gets behind his punches a little bit, figures the distance out, a little bit of timing, doesn't just blindly shoot a double leg. I would assume he's going to try and put Jackson on his back foot, which may prove a little bit more difficult. But if he can get him on his back foot, I like his odds a lot better of getting a takedown. He's going to get a takedown, guys. It's going to happen. Unless Jackson McVeigh has some of the best UFC debut wrestling defense that we've ever seen. But I do think that Bruno Ferreira, his experience, his grappling, his toughness, he's a tough bastard. He's hard to get out of there. I think it's just going to be a little much for Jackson McVeigh. I don't think McVeigh is going to be able to put one on his chin clean. We're going to go with Bruno. Ryan Spann and Lucas Bresky. Lucas Bresky, I'm pretty sure, is like 1-5 in his last 6 fights. Why the fuck is this dude fighting on a UFC pay-per-view card? Dana, we need to talk, man. Now, he did beat Walter Walker, which Walter Walker is on an insane tear right now, and he's heel hooking the world, right? But he got beat by Mick Parkin and Waldo Cortez Acosta and Martin Boudet. Guys, one, why does he still have an active contract in the UFC? That's my first question. 2, why is he on a fucking pay-per-view? This makes 0 sense. Absolute 0 sense. If just looking here, 1-4 in his last 5. Why are we on a pay-per-view? Who knows? Who knows? But the sad part is I couldn't tell you with confidence that Ryan Superman Spann is going to get him out of there. This could very, very well be, hopefully, Lucas Bresky's last fight. 9-6-1. And that one was a no contest on Dana White's Contender Series. And then he got called into, I'm 99% sure, he got into the UFC on a short notice call-up. But it's if I were odds makers, I'd be having, I guess if it was anyone but Ryan Spann, but plus 190 and he's 1-4. But then you got Ryan Spann who's also 1-4. So, one, why are either of these guys on this pay-per-view card? It makes no sense. They're 2-10 in their last 12 fights, guys. That's really, really staggering. And I have to pick someone here. That's the rough part. We've got 2 cans looking us dead in the eye that have no business being in the UFC octagon. But somehow they squeaked their way onto a UFC pay-per-view card in 2025. Blind pick. This is just a scrub matchup. Spann. Absolute disgrace that they're on this card. Jimmy Crute and Marcin Prachnio. This is a pretty decent matchup. I'm not too mad about this one. Jimmy Crute. Anytime that I think about Jimmy Crute, I always think about his fight. Who was it with? Anthony Smith, when he got drop foot. But look at this record, guys. This is a pay-per-view card. This is supposed to be up-and-coming prospects with good records. You know? New Orleans, you're getting a fucking banger on the prelims. I just... Why was he not on a fight night? I don't get it. And Marcin Prachnio is not putting together much of a better record himself. But what's crazy is that the odds makers must think a whole hell of a nothing on Marcin, because they got him as the underdog. Mainly probably because he's the older guy. We see that a lot with odds makers, but I see this as a very even match. Outside of the wrestling, that's most likely going to be Jimmy Crut's, if he's smart, way that he goes. But absolute disgrace, these last two fights here. Between Ryan Spann, Lucas Bresky, Jimmy Crute, and Marcin Prachnio. Let's see if we can... Let's check something real quick. What is the combined record of Marcin Prachnio, Ryan Spann, Jimmy Crute? Who's this other scrub? Lucas Bresky. Let's see if ChatGPT is smart enough to do this. Okay. So, in the last 5 years, between those two fights, we are 11-17-2. But hey, let's throw him on a fucking pay-per-view, why don't we, yeah? I'm going Jimmy Crute, even though I hate picking in that fight. Adam Fugit and Islam Dulatov. I'm really trying to stay optimistic here, guys. I really am. But we got a UFC debut. Now, this... Not saying that there should be anybody making their UFC debut on a pay-per-view card. But if there's going to be someone making their pay-per-view or a UFC debut, it should probably be someone with a record that looks a little bit something like this and a win streak that looks a little bit something like this, right? That I'm cool with. I'm cool with that. And then you got Adam Fugit, who's trying to spoil a very, very talented, one of the more talented welterweight prospects that we've seen come into the UFC in recent years. Which it desperately needs because the welterweight division is kind of brutal right now. Adam Fugit's trying to spoil that party. And he has a very slim chance of doing so. This is a bad man. He's on a 10-fight win streak. He will take you anywhere that the fight goes. I mean, he'll knock you out. He'll sub you. He's got really good wrestling defense. He's got really good wrestling as well. His single legs are fire. Kind of feel like they're feeding Adam Fugit to the wolves here. We got a 10. Not only is he on a 10-fight win streak, but he's got a 10-year age difference. Okay. We're going Islam Dulatov. Easy money. Minus 600. Next. Scary man. Very vicious knockout in his UFC debut after a very vicious knockout TKO in his Dana White Contender Series. I think it's going to be really, really difficult to come against a... Hang with me here. This guy is 6'4" and 186 pounds, okay? I guarantee you none of these cats are anywhere close to 6'4". 6 foot. And who's the guy he's fighting? 6'2". 6'4", guys, for the middleweight division. That's crazy. That's like Kevin Holland, you know? But he's built like a brick shit house. Is it crazy that we're gonna go back to back UFC debut picks here? Because I feel like it's a little crazy. But I feel like it's not at the same time. Atiba is an absolute specimen. And Robert Valentine is a little bit of... he can be timid at times. And Atiba is going to bring the pace. And I think it's just going to be a little bit too much volume-wise. I'm going to go Atiba here. Francisco Prado and Nikolai. Francisco Prado is also struggling, if I'm not mistaken. 1-3 in his last 4 since he came into the UFC. He's a fun fighter, though. I like he usually puts on some pretty good scraps. Fighting a guy 0-2. I know I'm not giving you guys a whole lot of like analysis and shit on these like first few prelims. And I don't want to say it's not because I care, but it's because I genuinely am almost so shocked that I can't believe that I'm sitting here breaking down their fights on this pay-per-view. Because I would be hard-pressed to say that in the prelims, outside of the people that are making their UFC debut, I would say in the prelims, we've got maybe in the last 5 years, we've got maybe 10 Ws. We've got an average record of 1-4 in their last 5 fights. But again, this is where it picks up. I can give these a little bit more attention, but forgive me if I sped through this absolute shitstorm of early prelim card that we've got. I'm going to go Francisco Prado. I think he's ran into some hardships in his last few fights. I don't think that means anything as far as how he's going to come out in this fight. Again, I think he's pretty talented. He's a little bit at a disadvantage here, height and reach, but he's going to be the much younger fighter. I think he's going to be a better striker than Nikolai. But Nikolai, I think, is certainly going to have the power advantage. But Francisco's probably going to come out of it with a unanimous decision. We should call it UD. Francisco Prado. Moving on. All right, now we're getting to like the real fights here, okay? Thank you for hanging with me through that atrocity of early prelims. Marvin Vettori and Brendan Allen. I absolutely love this fight. I think there is a very high percentage that this fight goes to the ground. Brendan Allen is got some really slick jiu-jitsu. Marvin Vettori kind of has like dumb guy jiu-jitsu, if that makes sense. Like he kind of has similar jiu-jitsu in my opinion as like a DDP. It doesn't really look good, but it's effective, right? Like when he choked out Izzy, you were like, somehow that didn't look good, but hey, it worked, you know? So I think Brendan Allen is going to have a pretty clear submission advantage in this fight. I don't think that he has like an overall like grappling, if that makes sense. I don't think he has a grappling advantage. Submission-wise, absolutely. I don't think Marvin Vettori poses any sort of risk to Brendan Allen actually getting submitted. but I think it might be difficult for Brendan Allen to submit Marvin Vettori. But in general, I think he's going to be, in the grappling exchanges, Brendan Allen is most likely going to be one step ahead of Marvin Vettori. Wouldn't surprise me one bit if Marvin Vettori finds himself in submissions. But I don't know if, unless it's a rear naked choke, I don't know if you're going to get Marvin out of there with a submission. But if Brendan Allen can get to his back, I can certainly see it. I do think Brendan Allen is gonna take this one home. There's something to be said about the experience that Marvin Vettori has had. The last few years have certainly not been in his favor. He went from, I'm going to be the first Italian champion, to losing and having a pretty decent skid over the last few years. Really having trouble putting it together. He's a very boring, as far as finishes go, fighter. I don't know if he's finished a fight in his last fucking 5. Yeah, just straight up UDs. And I get it. I know Marvin Vettori has 9 subs, but like, it's been a while. Okay, guys. Those subs all came in early on in his UFC career and on the regional scene when he was early pro. Okay, once he got to the UFC, he wasn't really subbing many people, right? So I'm going Brendan Allen. I think striking wise, he's definitely gonna give Marvin Vettori problems. Marvin Vettori, his head stays on that center line, and he just eats punches, and he is able to walk through punches and make people uncomfortable and put a pace on them, and that's what he weaponizes, almost like a Merab. Not as good as Merab. I'm not trying to compare them by any means, but I'm saying that Marvin Vettori puts a pace on people and eats their best shots, and that demoralizes his opponent, and he tends to walk them down and kind of make things a little bit of a dirty fight, and that's kind of what he's going to try to do against Brendan Allen. But I think Brendan Allen's going to come in with the right game plan, get Martin out of there. I do think it's going to be a finish. We're likely going to see a submission, but it's not going to be from Marvin Vettori. Kyler Phillips and Vinicius Oliveira. This is a super fun matchup. One of the most talented prospects we have, definitely at the bantamweight division. I mean, he's up there at the bantamweight division, if not. Yeah, he's probably the most talented prospect we have in the bantamweight division right now. Just as far as like well-roundedness, you know, we've got other guys that are really good in certain areas, but they're not well-rounded like him. Vinicius is very talented, especially for how many fights does he have? 3 in the UFC. He's on a huge fat win streak. 5-fight win streak. He's feeling himself. Got a good UD over Saeed and Ricky Simone. Those are both super tough guys. Like, he's used to getting people out of there, and I think we are probably going to see one of these guys get finished in there. But his last 2 fights that were UDs are, you know, those are tough dudes to get out of there. Ricky Simone's a tough guy. Saeed Nurmagomedov, very talented. Kyler Phillips fighting out of the MMA lab down in Arizona, I believe. He's super talented. He doesn't fight like very often, and I think that's kind of been the reason why he's not really been in the rankings as far as and being consistent. But Kyler's, I think that's why people have him as the underdog, is because he doesn't fight enough that people remember how damn good he is. He's chaotic, but it's controlled chaos. That's the best way I can explain Kyler Phillips. He's got kind of a like really wide, chaotic, bouncy stance, but it's very technical. His grappling is really good. His takedowns and takedown defense are solid. and he spars with some super high-level guys at the lab. I know he cross-trains a little bit at Tim Welch's gym as well, so he's getting probably some decent looks there. But like, he's getting great looks at the MMA lab, and people forget because he doesn't fight that often. Like, he only fought twice in 2024 and once in 2023, once in 2022. But beat Rowney Barcelos, who that old bastard has given some people in the bantamweight division a run for their money, aka Peyton Talbot, aka Cody Garbrandt. Pedro Munez lost to Rob Font. Like, Rob Font is a very game opponent, so this is a really tough one. But I think I'm going to go Kyler Phillips. I think his experience is going to come out here. And I know that sounds a little goofy saying experience when it comes to the fact that Vinicius has, 10 more fights than he does. But I'm talking UFC experience and the level of guys that Kyler Phillips has fought. I think it's just going to pay dividends. If this gets nasty, Kyler Phillips is going to be ready to go into deep waters. His takedowns, I think, are going to play a big factor here. And Vinicius has great takedowns too. Both these guys, I want to be very clear, this is certainly a flip of a coin. Both of these guys are very, very talented. But I'm going to go with the underdog here, Kyler Phillips. Going to be a banger of a fight, though. You can bet your bottom dollar. Moving on to the main card, Michael Johnson and Daniel Zellhuber. Daniel gave us, his last few fights have just been barn burners, I think. But he's a fun fighter. Real tall and lanky. But Michael Johnson, he's an OG. You can't count him out. You can't. He's been slept a few times and I do think that he's probably going to get his chin touched up a little bit in this one. Zellhuber puts a pace on his opponents. He gets in your face. He's super lanky. Zellhuber puts the pace on guys. Michael Johnson, we've seen him fold under pressure multiple times. And he always gets clips in his fights because he's willing to trade. He's willing to take one to give one. And when you start getting up there in age, you're only almost 40 years old. He's had some rough knockouts in some of his last few fights. And he's at quite a height and reach disadvantage here. And striking wise, Zellhuber is just very crisp. His boxing is solid. He's got submission threats. Michael Johnson's not going to catch him in the sub. He's not going to be, I don't think, hitting any takedowns himself. I think this is most likely going to stay on the feet. And that's going to be no bueno for Michael Johnson. I think Daniel Zellhuber is going to make it look pretty easy. Could get him out of there pretty easy with a sub. I could see that. But I could also see him ending it via punches. But it could be a UD. I don't know. I really don't think so. Michael Johnson is a willing dance partner. He's not going to be moving laterally trying to stay away from Zellhuber. He's going to a little bit, but he'll get frustrated eventually and start overextending. We'll lock it in. Zellhuber by TKO. Dan Ige and Patricio Pitbull. Dan Ige, 100%. Absolutely. Patricio Pitbull, after the performance that I saw in his UFC debut, you would be hard-pressed to get me to pick him against Stephen Hawking, let alone Dan Ige. You got to remember, Dan Ige took a fight with Diego Lopez on like a day's notice and went to a decision and gave him a hell of a fight. And then lost to Lerone Murphy, who's a very, very talented contender. And then beat Sean Woodson who Sean Woodson is a sniper, an absolute sniper. Dan Ige had to overcome a massive reach disadvantage and height disadvantage against him. Now he's got Pitbull, who's right around his size. I don't think Pitbull hits nearly as hard as Dan Ige. Dan Ige hits like a freaking bomb. The only way that Patricio gets any sort of momentum in this fight is gonna be on the ground, but Dan Ige is good on the ground. Like, he's not a slouch. I think Patricio might be a little bit better jiu-jitsu wise, but I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground. But Dan Ige 100% is going to come away with this one. Again, I just don't see in what world. Again, the decision making on this card in general is a little questionable. I think we all know that at this point. Putting Pitbull on another pay-per-view card, I think I can speak for everyone by saying that no one gives a fuck about Patricio Pitbull, especially after his UFC debut, where he looked like he didn't belong. Him and Patchy Mix, both of them, terrible, terrible debuts. But here we are, and Pitbull's on a pay-per-view. Make that make sense, UFC. Make that make sense. Dan Ige should be on a pay-per-view 100%. But what does this do for Dan Ige? Right? Like, what does this fight do for Dan Ige? Can you tell me? I'm all ears. So he was just fighting Patricio for the fuck of it, I guess. Whatever. But Dan Ige is going to hopefully retire Patricio. He's probably got a 3-fight contract, so we'll see him maybe on another pay-per-view after he loses this one. Who the fuck knows? But Dan Ige gonna get it done easy. Let's go. Kevin Holland, Daniel Rodriguez. It always depends what version of Kevin Holland is showing up on fight night. That will always be true when taking into account how a fight is going to go when Kevin Holland is involved on the other side. D-Rod has been kind of consistently shitty the last few fights. Or sorry, he's coming back from a tough 3-fight skid. Now, I will put an asterisk next to that by saying that he came back by beating a can of Alex Morono and a shell of Santiago Ponzinibbio. Okay? Now, it was an okay fight up until the 3rd round, but I'm just throwing that out there that Daniel Rodriguez was 0-3 until he was spoon-fed Alex Morono and Ponzinibbio. Kevin Holland is not Ponzinibbio and not going to be an easy fight. Even on the nights that Kevin Holland doesn't show up and he's kind of dicking around, and he's still going to give D-Rod a very tough fight. I don't think D-Rod's going to be knocking him out. I could see Kevin Holland getting a submission here potentially. He's riding high off of that sub win that he had against Vicente Luque. He's got the very clear striking advantage as well, not only in reach, but D-Rod has a very conventional boxing style, and we've seen Kevin Holland pick apart those types of guys. You know, Kevin Holland gets himself in trouble against guys that mix it up a lot, and they're a threat they're a threat via takedown. I don't really see that with D-Rod. And even if he does take him down, Kevin Holland has definitely gotten a lot better about urgency getting back up to his feet. So I'm going to go Kevin Holland in this one. I think D-Rod is going to be a little bit out of his class here. Kevin Holland's probably going to pepper him a good bit. And if D-Rod wants to take things to the ground, I think Kevin Holland definitely has better jiu-jitsu. You gotta be careful with those lanky motherfuckers, man. They'll snatch you up. That Darcy hit on Luke, I mean, he didn't even chop the arm. Or maybe it was an anaconda choke. It was an anaconda choke. But his arms are so long, he can just shoot them through. Like, when someone's in turtle, most people don't have the length in their arms to shoot the choking arm all the way through to the other side of the armpit and then lock up the figure four. Kevin Holland is, right? Like, that's what he did with Vicente Luque. So that's just a different style of jiu-jitsu that you have to be aware of when you're fighting someone that's this lanky. But I think Kevin Holland's probably going to get it done. Paulo Costa and Roman Koplayov. This has the making to be a really, really boring fight. I'm just going to say it. I think it's going to be about midnight, probably closing in on 12:30 when this fight happens. So I'm going to tell you, it's either going to be an absolute barn burner and Paulo Costa is going to throw caution to the wind. Roman Koplayov, he is pretty aggressive, so like this is all, in my opinion, going to come down to Paulo Costa. We've seen him be a little timid in some fights. Now in his last, if I remember correctly, his last few fights, he's kind of brought the fire back a little bit. But I'm just saying that there is a potential that this could be a snoozer, because both of these guys know that if it's not a snoozer, one of them's going to sleep. And that's what happens. It's okay. We know that when both guys know that there's a chance they get slept, but we think it's going to be a banger, sometimes it's quite the opposite, because, you know, they don't want to get knocked out. So I could see Paulo Costa not engaging a ton. But oh, Jesus, Paulo Costa. How has he not failed a drug test in all his years in the UFC? He makes a mockery of it, too. You know? Like, he trolls about the juice. He's got a fucking chain that says the juice. Do you think I'm making that up? Go look it up. He's legit got a piece of jewelry that says the juice. I digress. I'm going to go with Roman Koplayov here. And that's that. Southpaw versus Orthodox. We've seen Paulo Costa get eaten alive with not only leg kicks, but body kicks. And Paulo Costa doesn't have the ability to switch stances. And if you chew his front leg up, we've seen it time and time again, that's a very easy way to win against Paulo Costa. You chew that right leg up, he slows down, his power is gone, he starts winging overhand rights, putting everything into his punches. And that's Paulo Costa for you. He's had the same exact approach to every fight since I've been watching the UFC. And he gets his legs eaten up in every single fight. So, going with Roman Koplayov. Moving on, main event. The Diamond Dustin Poirier. Making his last walk to the UFC. It will be roughly 1 a.m. on the East Coast, and I will be sobbing on my couch. You can be certain of that. When that song comes on, I will most likely be crying. I'm not too much of a man to admit that. Dustin Poirier is the reason that, you know, some people became fans of this sport. He was certainly a big reason as to why I found this sport so fascinating. You know, some people think he's a prick and that his humbleness is two-sided and two-faced, and, you know, think what you want, but inside the octagon, this guy has given us some of the most memorable fights in UFC history. And you could induct a handful of his fights into the UFC Hall of Fame. And I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Okay? The second fight, Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier 2, UFC Hall of Fame. Dustin Poirier versus Dan Hooker, UFC Hall of Fame. That fight may be the best fight in UFC history. If you have not seen the Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier in the octagon with no spectators, they even have one with no commentary, do yourself a favor and go enjoy. But Dustin Poirier is making the final walk. Allegedly, Lil Wayne is going to be live performing during his walkout. Maybe. I hope that doesn't happen. I hope they do the Shine Bright Like a Diamond. I think the crowd is going to be absolutely bonkers. It's in New Orleans, in his hometown. You can't really write a retirement fight much better than this. And who better to go up against than Max Holloway, right? I know there's not, if this wasn't his retirement fight, no one really wanted to see a trilogy between these two. But, both the two first fights were bangers, especially the second one. The third one is undoubtedly going to be, it can't not be with these two. They've never been in a boring fight, neither one of these guys. Go back and watch all 50 plus, 60 plus fights that both of these guys have combined, and you will not find one boring fight. Someone is gonna go to sleep or be super busted up. That's literally the only two ways this thing goes. And I might shit my pants if someone gets subbed. Because that's the type of fucked up shit that the universe does, is they put two brawlers like this, and then someone does something stupid. Max goes, I'm going to do some jiu-jitsu, and shoots in on Dustin Poirier, and then he writes off a guillotine, finally hits the ghillie, and ends his career with the ever reclusive and elusive guillotine, right? There is a world where that happens, and I hope that that's not what happens. But what I do believe, one of two things is going to play out here. We're either going to get an absolute 5-round war, just like we had in the rematch, or someone is going to go to sleep. Max Holloway is coming off of a knockout from Ilia Topuria. First time he's ever been finished and knocked out. Dustin Poirier has been finished a few times, but both guys are very durable, even though they've been finished multiple times. So it's either going to be someone's getting TKO'd, knocked out, or it's going to be a 5-round war. And Max is saying that he's down to just get in the middle of the octagon, straight the fuck up as soon as the fight starts. I don't think that's going to happen, but how epic would it be if they do go all 5 rounds, beating the tar out of each other, and then we get another 10 seconds of just chaos in the middle of the octagon? I'm super pumped about that. I'm sitting here literally fantasizing about this fight, about how violent and how it's going to end. Is that fucked up? I don't know if I've ever looked forward to a fight like this. Because to be honest, out of all the fighters that have retired since I started watching the sport back in 2019, this is the one that gets me, there's been some that's damn, that sucks, but this one, it's this is the first big loss that I feel like my generation of UFC watchers is kind of losing, right? This is an absolute legend of the sport. They better give him a longer retirement video than they did Anthony Smith. If Anthony Smith's retirement video is longer than Dustin Poirier's, we need to get the pitchforks and the Molotov cocktails and march on the Apex or the PI. Dustin Poirier better have an incredible retirement video after his fight. That's all I'm saying. Now, who do I think is going to win this fight? here's the deal. Out of both of these guys, Dustin Poirier, I believe, hits the hardest, especially after their last fight. It was very evident that power-wise, he held the edge. Okay? And I know that he's, Max Holloway's at 155 now, and he's got probably more power, right? But, that didn't change anything in their last two fights, or in their last fight, right? Like, this is the same Dustin Poirier and the same Max Holloway. So I think Dustin Poirier is going to still have the power advantage, and usually Max Holloway overwhelms his opponents with volume, but Dustin Poirier does an incredible job of when he's getting peppered, his guard is incredibly tight, right? So it's really tough to get a shot flush on him, especially when he's up against the fence. He's got extremely good head movement, not staying on a center line, especially when he's rocked. He does really, really good of moving his head. And so, like, it's I don't think Max Holloway is going to be catching him with a leg kick. So what I'm saying is I don't think, Max Holloway is going to be finishing with punches, right? I don't think there's a world where Max Holloway's leg kicks are good enough to knock him out. So, like, I don't necessarily see too many avenues for Max Holloway to win this fight, which is crazy because he's the betting favorite here. Dustin Poirier is the dog. That may be because he's older. I don't know. It's beyond me as to why Max Holloway is the betting favorite when he's coming off of a brutal knockout loss of Ilia Topuria. But he is 1-3 in his 3-1 in his last four. So, like, compared to Dustin Poirier, he does have a little bit better of a record, right? But head kick TKO, like, that's not going to happen. Justin Gaethje's head kicks, or kicks in general, are way more powerful. He's way bigger than Max Holloway. So I don't see Dustin Poirier losing in his retirement fight. I just don't. But caveat to that, Dustin Poirier is going to have a lot of pressure on him. He's going to be in his hometown. Emotions are going to be high. It's his last UFC fight. That has a lot to do, right? Like, you're in a much different mindset walking into that octagon than you are for normal fights. Like, you can't deny that. It's going through your head that it's your last fight. Holy shit, it's here. Those are all thoughts that are not present during normal walks to the octagon. So I'm hoping, and I think that his mental fortitude is good to not psych himself out in the moment, and it's just another fight, and he's going to go in there and do what he does, but, like, that is a factor. So I think Dustin Poirier is going to come around and get the dub, end his career on a high note. Max Holloway is still 33. He'll be fine. As long as he doesn't get brutally knocked out again, I say that, he'll be fine. He'll come back. Dustin Poirier and all the greats have lost multiple fights. I don't know if Dustin Poirier's actually ever lost 2 fights in a row. Yeah, he's never lost 2 fights in a row. But, for Max Holloway, even if he does lose and this is 2 fights in a row loss for him, he'll be all right. He'll bounce back. But I do think Dustin Poirier is going to get it done. I do think it's probably going to be a unanimous decision. Or a split decision, sorry. Yeah. We're going to go split decision. But fuck, is there going to be... Guys, my head's telling me split decision. My heart's telling me it's going to end in a finish. But also, my head's telling me, hey, dummy, they beat the tar out of each other in their last fight, and they didn't get each other out of there. And you don't really hit someone much harder than they were hitting each other. So it's just hard for me to say, like, yeah, they're going to get each other out of there when they beat the tar out of each other in the rematch. Okay, I'm locking it in. Dustin Poirier by decision. And that's a wrap. Overall, I'm sure it's going to be a great card. The early prelims, I know I was giving it a lot of shit in the beginning of this video, and rightfully so. I do think it is really crazy that you've got multiple people making UFC debuts, no matter how talented prospects they are, that you've got people that are 1-4, multiple people that are 1-4 in their last 5 fights, multiple people that are on multiple fight losing skids, and that's what you build the prelims on. I'm sorry, but that's bullshit. You know, we should not have fight nights like last weekend that outperform the prelims by a long shot. It's just, I don't understand it. You've got more eyes on big pay-per-view cards, and you're putting shitters on the prelims. So, again, I know I gave the prelims a lot of flack, but there are some decent fights on the prelims, and the last two, you know, Marvin Vettori versus Brendan Allen and Kyler Phillips versus Vinicius Oliveira are bangers. Those are going to be good fights. Obviously, the main card is solid. So, I don't want it to seem like it's all negative. I'm just speaking my mind that, you know, I do think that the prelims are a little lackluster, and I hope that that changes here in the near future because it's becoming an unfortunate trend. But let me know in the comments below who you think is going to take home the dub in the main event. Is Dustin Poirier going to have a storybook retirement night, or is Max Holloway going to spoil it? As always, appreciate you stopping by. Catch you in the next one. Peace.